Good morning. I guess we're beginning the afternoon now. I am Dr. Sandra Edmonds Crew, Dean and Professor of Social Work at Howard University. My colleagues from the School of Social Work and I are really pleased to join you today to discuss mental health and mental wellness in the African American community. I am joined by Dr. Kendall Moody and Dr. Janice Davis. Both will briefly introduce themselves to you. Dr. Kendall.
Yes, good morning or good afternoon. I am Dr. Kendall Moody, Assistant Professor in the School of Social Work at Howard University. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I've been a social worker for about 15 years, working with children, specifically children with chronic illness. But I have a special interest in children that are struggling with mental health disorders, so depression, anxiety, and some of the externalized disorders, which we'll talk about today. So thank you, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Moody. Dr. Davis.
Good day. My name is Dr. Janice Davis, and I am the Director of Clinical Education at Howard University School of Social Work. I have over 30 years experience as a social worker. I've worked with a number of different populations, including mental health issues and substance abuse, as well as family and children, and various health disparities. Thank you.
Okay. As stated earlier, thank you, colleagues. Both of them are licensed clinical social workers, so I'm really confident that the information that you will receive will be important and you'll be able to have trust in what's being said. As stated, again, I'm Sandra Edmonds Crew, Dean and Professor here at Howard University. I am also a social worker, but my focus is more on community-based work and community-based education program. And aging. I'm an ethnogerontologist focusing on older people and how they view their life course. I'm also the principal investigator of a SAMHSA grant where we specifically focus on mental health, suicide prevention, and awareness in the African American community. Before I begin our presentation today, let's pause and reflect upon the losses in Buffalo, New York. A moment, please. We extend our sincere condolences and concerns about the families in Buffalo who've experienced this loss. And we understand that it's individual losses to families, but it's also loss in the community. And collectively, we're feeling their grief and their loss. We say ashe to each person impacted by this heinous act of racism and hatred. Today, we are addressing mental health using a life course perspective. And that emphasizes the importance of changing our attitudes to embrace mental well being and the need to support our mental health. In a recent commencement address at Howard University, Taraji Henson was given an honorary doctorate degree. Dr. Henson reminded us the importance of replacing our negative attitudes about mental health and focusing more on affirming the attitudes of positivity as we think about our health and getting the needed help that is out there for us. So, because in part that May is Mental Health Awareness Month, we are able to kind of laser focus on mental health being essential to our overall health. It is often said that we need a checkup from the neck up. There are days that we need a checkup from the neck up. So the 2022 national theme, Together for Mental Health, reminds us of the importance of us having conversation and talking with each other about mental health and mental well-being. It's a collective communal activity in the African American community. Today, we hope to focus on 3 points. One, mental health is a serious problem in the Black community. Two, silence kills. We need to invest in our wellness, and that includes our mental health wellness. And three, treatment saves lives. When we get treatment, we are able to save our lives, the lives of people around us. So we are strongly endorsing that we get rid of the stigma and think about how we can get the treatment that will help. Addressing mental health in our community can be a touchy and it can be taboo for many reasons, including what I already mentioned, stigma and racism. According to the Minority Health Office of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, African Americans are 20% more likely to experience serious mental health problems, more so than the general population. One might ask the question, why is that? But I think most of us can look within ourselves and within our families, and we will see there's something going on. With the pandemic, we know that we are experiencing heightened mental health problems and concerns. Really important that we focus on this. So there are prevalent mental health myths in the Black community, and hopefully we will sort of bring some of these to life. 5 of them are, it's just the blues, it will pass. The second one is, you can pray your depression away. The third one is, Black women don't get depressed. We are super women. Fourth, Black folks don't commit suicide. And number 5, therapy is for white people. These myths are pervasive within the African American and the Black community, and it's important that we face them with the reality that we can adjust our attitudes about mental health. We can really get rid of some of these myths that really prevent us from getting the needed treatment. The facts are that our resistance to treatment and our silence is making us sicker, it's killing us, and it is wreaking havoc on our lives. According to the National Alliance of Mental Illness, Black adults in the United States are more likely than whites to report persistent symptoms of emotional distress, such as sadness, hopelessness, and feeling like everything is an effort to get it done. With again, the recent tragedy in Buffalo, even going to the grocery store has elevated these feelings of insecurity and discomfort. Going to church elevated those feelings of what's happening with us. Psychologist William Smith coined the term racial battle fatigue. And I understand this, racial battle fatigue. It describes the cumulative result of natural race-related stress, the response to distressing mental and emotional conditions. These conditions emerge from constantly facing dismissive, demeaning, insensitive, and hostile racial environments and individuals. Again, we are here to really bring attention and awareness to what is happening within the Black community. But our main focus is to emphasize that mental health is a serious problem in the Black community. Silence kills. We must invest in our own wellness, and treatment saves lives. So with that, it is my pleasure to turn this over to Dr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Crew. And that's an excellent introduction, as you touched on a lot of the points that I will discuss with everyone today. And I love that, check up from the neck up. I'm going to use that. um, so I really want to highlight, and I'm talking specifically about children and adolescents. So that's my focus in my discussion, the mental health as it affects Black youth. We see what we're seeing now, and according to the American Psychological Association and the Congressional Black Caucus, is that the mental health among Black youth has become a national emergency. Okay. And I want to explain why, and I want to paint an accurate picture here. So, as we talk about some of the more prevalent mental health concerns among Black youth, depression and anxiety comes to mind. So, we're seeing an increase in depression and anxiety within this population. So, Black youth between the ages of 12 to 17 years old, we're seeing where once there was a prevalence rate of 9%, now we're seeing almost 11% prevalence rate of depression among this group. That may not seem like a huge jump, but when we're talking about millions of people, millions of children, that's a significant jump that we're seeing there. Anxiety disorders are starting to increase among this age group. So we're seeing, particularly children between the ages of 5 and 11 years old, we're starting to see an increase in anxiety disorders. And I'm going to talk about how these present in children in this in this age group. But we're also seeing this as it relates to the recent pandemic. We're seeing an increase in disorders that are being exacerbated. Okay, so um, why this is a concern is that as depression and as anxiety begins to manifest, you may ask yourself, well, how does this present itself? What are some of the outcomes that we may see as children begin to experience some of these mental health disorders? And we're also seeing an increase in rates of suicide. So it's particularly children between the ages of 5 and 11. We're starting to see that they lead the pack amongst all children, regardless of race. Black children between the ages of 5 and 11 are leading the pack in relation to suicide. And that's concerning because historically, Black youth have not led the pack. They've trailed behind their counterparts in this respect. So this is beginning to what we're seeing as a concern here. And as I stated previously, the Congressional Black Caucus and American Psychological Association now deem this to be a public emergency, which we do need to act now. If we continue to uh, not sit on the sideline, but as we continue to see this increase and there's little done about this, then we will have poor outcomes as children reach adulthood. Now, what are some of the risk factors that go into poor mental health among children and adolescents? I want to talk about that here for a bit. So we're seeing that living in poverty is one risk factor. Now, what I want to highlight here is that poverty does not cause poor mental health among children, specifically Black children. What's happening is as Black children are living in poverty, they're experiencing discrimination. They're experiencing poor access to quality care. They're experiencing poor nutrition. These are some of the mediating factors that go into while they're having some of these internalized disorders. So, so then, how do we recognize this? How do we recognize this in our children who are our Black children who are experiencing depression, who are experiencing anxiety, where they may not be able to verbalize this? Then how do we recognize it? Well, I want to start in elementary school. It's children who are Black children who are in elementary school may struggle with clinginess with their parents or clinginess to their teachers in response to depression or anxiety. They may become hypervigilant where they may respond to situations differently than someone who's not experiencing depression or anxiety. You may see withdrawn behavior. So it's important for us to recognize when we're seeing this change in behavior because there may be something going on there that the child is not able to verbalize. as children reach middle school. Now think about this. This is a stage in development where children begin to hit puberty. They're engaging in team play. They're socializing with friends. So they encounter uh, situations at a faster rate. So they may begin to experience poor sleep. They may begin to worry about uh, what's happening at school or what's happening in a home. They may begin to experience bullying. We see an increase in bullying in this stage of development. Changes in behavior. If you notice that your child goes from being social to isolating themselves, that's a concern that we need to worry about and that we need to address. In high school, we begin to see an increase in substance use disorders. We begin to see an increase in um, absenteeism, um, and then thoughts of death and dying starts to occur in this age group, or may manifest in this age group. So, uh, while this is a concern among our Black youth, what's even more concerning is that while they're at higher rates of depression, higher rates of anxiety, they may begin to experience thoughts of suicide. Black youth are least likely to seek treatment for any type of mental health disorder. So, as you may recognize, that's a recipe for disaster. Okay, so what do we do now that we recognize that Black youth are at higher risk of mental health disorders, but least likely to encounter mental health treatment? This is something that we need to highlight, and we need to act now. Being silent, and I'm going to use these words intentionally, is like aiding and abetting the problem. Okay, we need to act now, develop better policies, better access to care, easier access to care. Um, and as we can begin to implement these policies, as we improve access to care, then we may see better outcomes among our Black youth, which now I see is being recognized as a national emergency.
Thank you, Dr. Moody. It's really important as I was thinking about your statement, uh, concerned uh, about the increase in suicide in the youth population. So we really have to think about it and really equip ourselves to address it and not say this is somebody else's family. We have to think about this is our family. We never know when we're going to have this experience in our own household, so we have to ready ourselves for this. Definitely important information about that stage of life. I would remind everyone that we have a link in the comments that we would like you to complete the survey as we talk about these topics. Really important. We need to hear from you. Uh, so we're really focused. We've talked about the early stages of life. We're looking at a life course perspective as we begin to think about mental health in the Black community. So Dr. Davis is now going to move us forward to adulthood.
Yes, we're going to start with young adults because it's really important that as we look at the mental health concerns that adolescents have that are not being met because they're not seeking treatment, then they're turning 18 and they are in some communities considered an adult. And we send them to college. Many of them have serious mental health issues as they are entering a very transitory phase of their life where they now have to make independent decisions. They have to participate in life in a manner in which they are totally unaccustomed. Unfortunately, approximately 58% of Black people with serious mental illnesses are ages 18 to 25, and about 50% are between 26 and 49, according to the African American Behavioral Health Center of Excellence. So many of them have moderate but chronic depression, in addition to other anxieties and disorders. We find that women have a higher rate than men, even though, as Dr. Crew previously stated, Black women are not depressed. Black women are not allowed to be depressed because Black women have to move forward, but that doesn't mean that you don't carry the battle scar of that depression with you as you're trying to move forward. We are also seeing this in many of our youth who are on college campuses. The number of students on campus who are committing suicide, as well as who are in need of services overall, is increasing. And as we move through the life cycle to from young adulthood to middle adulthood and to mainstream adulthood, you have an increased incidence of health problems. And these problems are secondary to the mental health problems because many of them are being medicated or socialized and acted out in other areas, and people are not taking care of themselves. They have chronic diseases which may impact their biochemical balances. They are also not using services because of all of the stigma and all of that is attached. During this phase, we often overlook such problems as Dr. Crew mentioned earlier about racism, but we also don't pay attention to grief and loss. COVID-19 made us aware a little bit more of isolation, but also of what grief and loss looks like that is outside of death and dying. So, how do you feel when you can no longer participate in life? You can't go to the grocery store. And then we have incidents such as this, which now isolates you even more. It's the incident in Buffalo. You don't really want to go to the grocery store, whereas during COVID, people wanted to get out to be able to socialize with other people. So you wonder the impact of such things as erratic unemployment. You can lose your job simply because you wear your hair differently. These are all common features in the African American community. You have covert and overt racism. You have stigma of mental health, but you also have poverty as a mental health issue. And people not taking into consideration that you are doing your best and they're constantly asking for more and more. So as a community, we have to appear that we have it all together and we have it all figured out. And that we're going to work through this with ease and most people will make it. But the problem is we have silent miseries going on. And we have a lot of self-doubt, and that internalization causes the physical health problems. But it is also met with the suicidal thoughts and plans. It's also met with excessive drinking and smoking, of both illegal and legal substances. It also includes the use of the how do I get away from all this pain and misery all the time? So I may abuse prescription drugs as a part of this process of escapism and or the potentiality of suicide, though I may not want to admit that I really just want to die and move away from all of this. So we can't accept those things. And the reason we can't accept them is because we have been told to be silent about our pain and our despair. We have been socialized to keep your family business in your family. You keep it at home. You don't tell anybody. Because if you tell somebody, it makes you appear weak. And if you're weak, then you don't represent a Black man or a Black woman, because Black women have to carry the weight of the world. We also attach to that the fear of being lazy, showing that we don't have strength, we lack motivation, and that we don't have enough faith in God. We are a spiritual being, and we say you should pray. As Dr. Cruz said earlier, pray it away and it'll go. But faith without works is a little questionable. So you have to put in some effort, and you have things available to you that would help you feel and get better. Many of the individuals involved experience a lot of mistrust of healthcare systems. That has been passed down generationally. So you don't trust that the person in that clinic is really going to talk to you, or you set up barriers that we view as convenience, but they view as artificial. Um, we now have moved where a lot of things are done via the computer. Well, some people aren't very comfortable using the computer. So if you're not comfortable, why would you want to meet someone for mental health services or go to an office where they're only going to let you talk to a computer and not a person? So we really need to consider how we utilize our resources, how we are often misdiagnosed in healthcare settings simply because we are poor, we are Black, and people make assumptions about who you are and what you are. Our communities tell us that, we don't want to appear crazy, so therefore we keep silent. So it's important that we take all of that into consideration as we move forward, because what we know that treatment saves lives. We know that if you ask for help, you'll get it. But you can't be afraid to ask for help, because only 1 in 3 Black adults who need mental health care actually receive it because they won't ask. So if you don't ask for help, no one can help you because people don't want to overstep their boundaries. They don't want to be rejected. So they try to support from a distance, but we must become comfortable with reaching out, to giving a hand, to taking someone somewhere. We may not have the answer. And it's important to say, I don't know, but I know somebody who might be able to help you. And I think that that is a very important part that we need to include in our belief system, because we need to be very creative to keep people engaged and interesting and participating in their self-help care. Thank you, Dr. Crew.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Dr. Davis and Dr. Moody, we have a question. What role does entertainment and social media play in the mental health of teens and young adults? So,
Yeah.
what do you say about that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Actually, it's sort of a double-edged sword, social media and entertainment. Yes, there's increase in access. There's an increase to the external access to the external world where you can't really shut it off. You can, but they don't. They don't. Particularly teens. Some even say they're addicted to just opening that Instagram app, that TikTok app, Facebook app, and then they get messages and they receive messages all across the world. So there are some studies out there that show that social media can have a negative effect or impact on teens and on their mental health, increase loneliness, depression, anxiety. They're constantly measuring their own lives and their own success against someone else's, which may also they're always constantly thinking about how how their lives measure against someone else, and that can cause them to experience depression or anxiety. Now, the other side to this in my work with children is that some of them are starting to use social media as a way to say, okay, yeah, this person is also going through some of the same things that I'm going through. What we're seeing on social media is people are, particularly teens, are becoming a little bit more vocal about their mental health concerns. And as they're becoming more vocal about it, other teens and other children will see, oh, I'm not going through this alone. Yes, I see that I experience the same things that this person over here is saying. So there are some protective factors in social media, but if we still have to be guarded and cautious in the way in which social media is used and how much access our children have to social media. So that's my response to that question.
Dr.
I
Davis, you
would
want to
say,
add anything?
I would definitely say for young adulthood, um, it can be a definite problem, because people are so interested in fitting in and socializing. And again, that measurement and what they see on television, what they think is real, but it really is not. And how you make yourself believe this is real. I think so many of them get caught up in life online that the reality of life becomes a bit overwhelming for many of them. Um, Liking a picture can ruin a relationship,
Mm.
which is really a foreign concept for me as an adult. But as young adults, I mean, I listen to them talk about, well, this person didn't like my post, and it has value. But I also know that sometimes when you're in those situations, they're very cautious about how they respond. So that shows you that there's a balanced side to this, that I want to attack your viewpoint and not attack your view. And in terms of, I'm not attacking you, I just don't agree with what you said and how you said it, and how you say that without any emotion attached in an environment that's got to be interpreted by someone else. It becomes very difficult with communication patterns. And I think that causes some difficulty, because you may have written back a response, but the person received it from a totally different angle in which you said it. But if they had heard it from your mouth, it would have presented differently. I do believe that a lot of people are buying into the view that this is real. And the TV shows, the housewives of this and all those kinds of shows that often do not show cohesive relationships are being played out in real life. And the reality is you need more support from your community and from each other.
Mhm. So, what should parents do if they see that their children are really having negative reactions to social media? So, what are some of the things that parents or grandparents or
Mhm.
others can do to address this?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and one of the tips that I give to parents is to one, notice the change in behavior, notice your child reactions. Parents are the experts; they're with their children more often than mental health professionals or anyone else. So parents are the ones that we lean on as mental health professionals to get information. So parents should notice the change in behavior. One. And as they notice this change in behavior, they can begin to set parameters around social media access. There are ways in which you can do that through different social media platforms. They may have ways where you can set parameters about what the child sees and what they're able to do on these different social media apps. Also, the last thing I'll say is that engage with your child. There shouldn't, I don't say there shouldn't, but we see that when there's more interaction between the parent and the child, then that is a protective factor for if the child does have access and is receiving these negative messages on social media. Based on the interaction that they have and the relationship they have with their parent, then that can serve to, as like I said, a protective factor. We're not seeing increased rates of loneliness, anxiety, depression, and some of the externalizing behavioral concerns. So those are my three suggestions right there. Notice the change of behavior, maybe set parameters, and increase child and parent interactions.
Thank you. Dr. Davis talked about trust. And so, building those trust relationships become really important, that parents and children trust each other. So, thank you so much for that. So, I'm going to move on to talking about aging. We talked about early childhood. Now we talked about early adulthood and later adulthood. But now I'm going to talk about aging. In 1964, the National Urban League published a report uh, focused on the disparities of African Americans who were older. And the report, Double Jeopardy, stated that the combination of age and race placed African Americans in double jeopardy for hardships in life. So, despite this report being over 60 years old, its truths are still marching on. We see that once we enter older age, the structural inequalities that have resulted during the life course continues to add on to the hardships. These hardships rest on the shoulders of older persons and create stressful living environments for them. So we will find that they have cumulative race related stressors, They're looking at Buffalo. I should say not they, we, because I'm a member of this population and I want to own that. As an older person, not only am I looking at what's happening in Buffalo, I'm going back to Selma. It's cumulative, the stress that we're thinking about. So we really have to begin to look at older persons as really having added stressors. So while aging in the Black community is sometimes considered a crisis because of this lifetime of racial and health inequalities. You know what you do, Dr. Moody, in your young age? Hitchhikes with you to older age. You don't really have that stop, and it's there. So if you start an attitude about mental wellness in your younger age, it follows you to old age. So I think we really have to be very mindful that we have these situations where older persons have health inequities. We know with COVID that many of the older persons in nursing homes were the first to have serious challenges. More older African Americans passed in nursing homes than many other groups. And that's because of some of the things such as social isolation. What is the first thing we did? We started saying, oh, you can't visit. And so therefore, the life support of many older persons who were in long-term care, it was disconnected, disrupted. And older African Americans really paid a higher price for this than others. But there are some myths that are in the African American community as it relates to aging in and of itself. Now, again, it's not just the African American community, but it really resonates as we began to talk about how we should get rid of the silence. We should talk about some of these myths that are really so common that we hear about. One is that senility or dementia is a normal part of aging. It is not. We know that it is not a normal part of aging. We know that 10% of persons living with Alzheimer's disease, they're about only 10% of the population, older populations living with Alzheimer's disease. We know that African Americans have a higher percentage, but yet it still is not a normal part of aging. We can't just look like everyone's going to get it. No, everyone is not going to get it. But we do know that many of the cognitive problems are related to stress and other issues, and it's treatable. Treatment is possible. Even with Alzheimer's, my mother was a victim of Alzheimer's, but we could extend quality of life through paying attention to her mental well-being. The second myth out there is that depression is common and untreatable among older adults. We want to get rid of that notion because we do know that older people have depression, but it is as treatable as a depression for younger people. So we really get into this mode of thinking that it is so prevalent that every older person is depressed. That is not true. But yet, when there is depression, there is treatment, and we can really help the person through that. So why might there be depression among older people? Well, I talked about the pandemic. There's grief and loss. There is loss of the connection with your family members. You may live in one area of the country and family members live in another area of the country. Dr. Moody has a young child, so they may not be able to connect with the grandchildren the way they want to connect with the grandchildren. We know that there's a loss of sibling groups. My uncle now, he is the only living person in his sibling group. So he's 90, but yet all of that memory is gone. So who does he talk about the good old days? The good old days. We know that there's loss of income. Some individuals are forced to lose positions, and they are not financially ready because of the structural inequalities that were preventing them from really earning the incomes that they deserved. So we know that all of these things really are ripe in terms of creating in terms of contributing to depression with older persons. And we know that there are beliefs that about depression, such as fears of, if I tell someone, are they going to put me in a place? Are they going to take me from my home? We know that there's a lack of information about it because we've been silent about it. That we can talk about high blood pressure, we can talk about that, but can we talk about I'm feeling down? As Dr. Moody and Dr. Davis said, the one thing I have appreciated about the younger population is they talk about it. They put it out there. Now, whether we always listen to it is a different question. But older persons like myself, we are more private about what's going on. So it's really important that we, begin to think about that depression is not prevalent among everyone, but it is there, and we can really do something about it. Another myth that's out there, that addiction is not an elderly mental health problem. Now, colleagues, you know that older people have addiction problems as well as other individuals, whether it's substance use, opioids, all of everything that's happening in the younger group is happening in the older group. Now, if you think about us baby boomers, we really had a free spirit early in life. Remember, I tell you things hitchhike from younger age to older age. So we really have to look at addiction as a serious problem in the older community as well. There's this notion that seniors don't respond well to treatment because they are set in their ways. Absolutely, I'm set in my ways, but I can change. We all learned to change during the pandemic, right? Whether or not we were computer literate before, we knew that we had to lean into this technology and figure it out for our own survival. That is not true. Many older people are more computer literate than younger persons. So we can't carry this notion that we can't respond because we set in our ways. We may have strong opinions, but we also have equally strong opinions about being well and being healthy. So we really have to move beyond this notion that seniors don't respond well to treatment. We know that they absolutely do. We absolutely do. And the other one is myth that we often hear is that seniors are beyond their functional years. So why give them treatment? Well, how many of you know about centenarians? I mean, so when we think about being older person, it may be the longest life stage that we have. It depends upon when you start thinking of yourself as a senior. AARP started putting us there at the age of 50. But if you start looking at 60, 65, it is not unusual for us to live to ages 80, 90, 100. I spoke with an alum who was 103 years old the other day, and her recall was better than my recall about things. So it is really important that we don't pay attention to these myths that keep us from getting the treatment that we need. Is that so? If you ask a person, an older person, they will give you their response to it, but you are there to serve and to support. Now, why are older people, again, really sometimes feeling depression? Well, also health declines. So when you start looking at health declines, you have the diabetes, hypertension, you have chronic illnesses. They keep you from going out the way you want to go out. But these are things that we can help with using the community resources that are there. So I would say, as we begin to think about older persons, we want to pay attention to their beliefs about mental health. We want to make sure that they are not feeling that if I talk about it, I'm going to be stigmatized and not eligible for something, or my children or my loved ones are not going to see my value. We also want to talk about the barriers to seeking treatment. I talked about some of the chronic conditions. In African American older people, Depression is misdiagnosed. People don't diagnose that as often as they do in other communities because there's that buy-in to, well, when you get older, things change. Well, things change for the better as well. They don't just change for the worse, they change for the better. Sometimes you have financial security and freedom with older age, but sometimes there's that grandmother and that grandfather who've had to take on the care of those grandchildren, and that adds additional burden to them. So, but this mistrust is huge. They've seen systems mistreat African Americans. They've seen that. And so we have to help them to get over that. We know that blackdoctor.org talked a lot about the pandemic and the Tuskegee uh, experience, where folks assume that I'm not going to take the vaccine because look at what happened to those individuals in Tuskegee. Those families have made it very clear that those are different issues. During the Tuskegee experience, the medication was being withheld. During the pandemic, we were trying to give people medications to keep them safe from the COVID-19. So we really have to help older people understand some of the historical trauma and how it may have influenced their thinking. I'm thinking about drapetomania. Drapetomania was a mental health diagnosis during our enslaved period. So an African American who ran away was said to be mentally ill, and they diagnosed it as drapetomania. Well, those things are in the memory banks of older people. And so we have to really work with them to understand, yes, those things happened. And so, but we can really make your quality of life better if we are really giving you that checkup from the neck up, making sure that I'm okay when all of my children and my grandchildren live at a distance, checking in to make sure that people are okay. I talked already about the cultural strategies that African Americans use. Often we have our own remedies for things. Some work, some not so much. But we really need to kind of think about how we use faith. Faith operates in connection with other things. So when we say that we just take our mental health problems to the altar and leave them there, well, faith should also tell us, as Dr. Davis said, that the higher being put mental health practitioners out there to help you. They too operate under faith. So we have to really, be the myth busters to say it's okay to have faith and to experience depression, just as it's okay to have faith and have diabetes. They can coexist. You don't have to isolate them. You don't have to be silent. Get help. Find someone you trust. So again, we have presented to you a life course perspective, not just looking at one age group, looking at across the lifespan, across the life course. African Americans have challenges, but we know that mental health is treatable. Mental health problems, mental wellness is where we're headed. We need to grab all of the joy that we can so that we can be healthy in the long term. I have a question here that I'd like to raise. And the question is, if someone is using drugs and alcohol to self-medicate, should they be treated first or simultaneously with mental illness? What should be treated first? Is it uh, the alcoholism or the use of alcohol or the mental illness if it exists? Is there an order to the treatment?
So I would say, particularly as a social worker, you begin where your client is, and whomever that person is, it's what they see as the most prevalent problem, because they may actually not see the drug usage as a problem. It may be a problem and it may be a contributing factor, but if you don't meet them to help them with what they think is important, you will never get to the drug treatment part. And so as we look at substance abuse treatment, it's important that we have a number of different models available to us. Some people are truly abstinence, where you stop everything and you go cold turkey. Other people use the harm reduction method, and then there are variations in between. Harm reduction is where you try to get them to gradually decrease from what their usage is. But if they have a problem, you need to see what they think is the problem, work on that, support them in that, and then begin to bring into play the other things that may be contributing factors to the problem. But you need to address what they consider as the problem first.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. It really is important when we are working in the area of mental well-being, is that in social work we talk about starting where the client is, understanding what they are perceiving as a problem, and also what they see the substance use as a solution to. Just like suicide, people often see it as a solution to something. And so we have a responsibility as family members, as members of congregations, to help individuals know that that is not the solution, the use of substances. It is usually contributing to the problem as we think about this. So mental health in the Black community is particularly important. We certainly want to receive questions from the audience. If anyone has a question, we will certainly respond to that question as the questions are being submitted. Dr. Moody, what is a takeaway point that you want this audience to be left with about uh, young people?
Yeah, I really want to highlight this or stress the importance of how we need to act now in order to help our young people deal with mental health concerns. Um, Young people typically are not going to just come up to you and say, "Hey, I'm struggling with depression. I'm struggling with anxiety. I'm struggling with some type of mood disorder." We have to be the ones to um, encourage young people to seek help. It's We have to recognize how particularly vulnerable it is for someone to come in, or young people to start talking about things that are distressing to them, their deepest darkest secrets and things that have happened to them in their lifetime. That's a pretty, it's hard for them to do, it's hard for anyone to do, but particularly young people. So it's important for us to provide pathways for young people to talk about these instances. There are a various, plethora of mental health intervention programs. It doesn't have to be this sit down, tell me what brought you here type of therapy. There are support groups, there's mentor programs. Getting young people involved in different activities can be therapeutic. So we can start to think outside the box here as far as intervention programs, but we really have to hone in and stress and recognize the public health emergency in which we're under, which we're seeing this increase in mental health disorders in our Black youth. By not doing anything, Dr. Crew, the trend is going to begin to or continue to increase, and we're headed for a really dark time if we don't
Mhm,
do anything now.
mhm. Thank you, Dr. Davis.
I would say for adulthood that we really need to learn to talk. We know that it's a problem. We know that mental health is an issue for our community, but we need to be open to talking about it, to offering help, and to be able to seek treatment. I think when we can normalize that asking for help doesn't mean that you're weak, but actually shows your strength, that we will benefit our community greatly, because they will be stronger and more willing to participate in things that they don't understand or that they're just confused about at the time, if I'm not going to be judged negatively. Judgment is very difficult to deal with. So I would say just be open, listen, show love and affection, and always be willing to offer a hand, an ear, as someone is going through something that you really have no idea how simply listening might save someone's life, and you had no idea you were doing that.
Mhm. Thank you so for that. With our mental health awareness training, we train individuals in something called Qpr, Suicide Prevention, so that they understand the signs and that are there with suicide. But it's important that as laypersons, not only as profession, this is the entire family's business to know more about this. There is a SAMHSA hotline, 1-800-273-TALK. 1-800-273-TALK. So if you don't want to talk with someone in the family, there is someone else that you can talk with, that you can maintain a distance from, but yet really kind of share your concerns. So when I think about older persons and and the takeaway I want you to have is I'm thinking about, we say let go and let God. Well, let me reframe that for you. Let go and let God help you to get mental health treatment. It is not simply just passing it over to the our spiritual connection. It is really being focused there and realizing that it is okay to have a problem. It is okay. When you acknowledge it, then you can get help. And once you get help for the problem, then it can really make it better for your entire family. It is not just about you. When individual receives treatment, it improves the whole family system and the whole dynamic. We have to deal with this mistrust. Certainly, this country has earned our mistrust, but there are competent providers like Dr. Davis and Dr. Moody and members of my faculty and other practitioners who understand the family dynamics that you have. They understand those dynamics. And so if you find someone that you trust, not the one, I went to this one and I didn't like this one. Well, when you go to the grocery store and you buy something you don't like, you don't just give it up altogether. You go get another brand. So go find someone that you can relate to, whether it's through your faith-based community, whether it's through your health insurance policy. What's important is not to let it become more of a problem than it has to become a problem. It is okay. We can't be silent about this. And some of the other things that come up sometimes that we're silent about is interpersonal violence, domestic violence in the family, secrets. These secrets that we have held on to generations. These secrets are making us ill. We have to find a way to talk about these secrets and address them so that we can be a healthier community. Because as we are dealing with the stressors of today, we need all of us to be as healthy as possible. Not only our physical health, we really have to focus on our mental well being. So there are community resources that are out there to support you. And if you don't like the one you tried, try another one until you find someone who can help. Because we don't want to hear another story about a young African American male committing suicide. We want to be able to have asked the question of them to see what's going on. So, mental health is important. Even though we're talking about it during Mental Health Awareness Month, it's important every month, every day. We have to invest in knowing and caring for one another and really finding someone that we can connect to and breaking the silence, understanding that treatment does work. And there are competent practitioners like the ones I have introduced you to today that can help you through some of the challenge. It is indeed our pleasure at Howard University to have had this opportunity to speak with you. And we are excited about continuing this dialogue about mental health in the Black community. Thank you very much.